Look at him standing there like he owns the place.
Keep that light on him.
Got it. Smile for the camera, old man.
You might want to check your coolant, driver.
You hear me? This is our stop tonight.
I hear you.
I've driven over 4 million miles in my life as a trucker. But there was one night at a dingy truck stop off I-40 in western New Mexico where I almost didn't make it out alive to tell this story to my kids. Folks, if you've ever felt that cold chill down your spine just for being who you are, you'll know what I'm talking about. Let me take you back to that night in 2018, the last run I ever took. And maybe you'll see why it still haunts me like a shadow that won't fade. My name's Earl Jackson, and at 68 years old, I was still behind the wheel of my old rig, a beat-up Freightliner that had seen better days. I'm a black man from the South, born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, where the summers are sticky and the winters bite hard. I lost my wife, Clara, 9 years before that trip. Cancer took her quick, like a thief in the night. We had 2 boys, Daryl and Marcus, both grown now with their own families. Daryl's the oldest, works in sales up in Memphis. He's got himself a nice house and a wife who's always posting pictures on Facebook. Marcus is down in Houston, fixing cars like his old man used to before I hit the road full time. They call me on Sundays, but it's quick. How's the weather, Dad? You eating right? I tell them I'm fine. But truth is, after Clara passed, the house felt empty as a ghost town. That's why I kept driving. Even after retiring from the big hauls, sitting home alone would have killed me slower than any highway wreck. That particular run started simple enough. I'd picked up a load of frozen meats and veggies from a warehouse in Albuquerque, bound for a small chain of grocery stores back in Little Rock. It was nothing fancy, just enough to keep the bills paid and my mind off the quiet. The pay was decent, about $1,200 for the round trip, and I figured it'd take me 2 days if the weather held. I left Albuquerque around noon, the sun beating down on the desert like an old friend waving goodbye. New Mexico's got that wide-open sky that makes you feel small, but in a good way, you know? The kind that reminds you there's more out there than your own troubles. I'd been on the road for hours, listening to my favorite AM station crackling with country tunes. Merle Haggard singing about Mama Trying, Johnny Cash growling through the speakers. My rig hummed along I-40, the engine purring like it always did after I tuned it up myself. I stopped for coffee at a rest area near Gallup, watching the sunset paint the rocks red and orange. It was peaceful, the way the highway can be when you're alone with your thoughts. I thought about Clara a lot on those drives. How she'd pack me sandwiches with extra mustard, or call to check if I'd seen any pretty sights. God, I missed her laugh. That deep, warm sound that could cut through the roar of 18 wheels. By midnight, I was running low on fuel, so I pulled into this old truck stop just west of Grants. It wasn't much. A faded sign flickering Joe's Fuel and Eats, a couple of pumps under harsh yellow lights, and a diner that smelled like grease and burnt coffee. I'd stopped there before. It was one of those places where truckers like me grabbed a quick fill-up. No frills, just the basics. The night air was crisp, biting at my cheeks as I stepped out of the cab. My boots crunching on the gravel, I stretched my back, feeling the ache from hours of sitting, and hooked up the nozzle to the diesel tank. The pump whirred to life, and I leaned against the truck, watching the numbers tick up. That's when I heard footsteps. Not the usual shuffle of another driver heading to the John, but deliberate steps, 3 sets, coming from the shadows near the diner. I glanced over, and there they were, 3 white guys, maybe in their 30s, dressed in flannel shirts and jeans, looking like they just rolled out of a bar. One had a baseball bat slung over his shoulder, tapping it lightly against his palm. The leader, a stocky fellow with a scruffy beard and a trucker hat pulled low. stopped a few feet away and eyed me up and down. His buddies flanked him, one chewing on a toothpick, the other cracking his knuckles. "Hey, old man," the leader said, his voice slurring just a bit, like he'd had one too many beers. "You've been driving through here a while, huh? I've seen your rig before. You know this spot don't take kindly to folks like you hanging around?" My heart skipped a beat, that old familiar knot twisting in my gut. Folks like me. I'd heard that phrase more times than I could count in my life. Back in the Jim Crow days as a kid, during civil rights marches, I watched on TV. Even on the road where some diners still gave you the side eye. But at 68, I thought I'd seen the worst of it fade away. I kept my voice steady. Like Clara always told me, don't let 'em see you rattle. "Just filling up, son. Heading east. No trouble here." He laughed, a mean, barking sound that echoed in the empty lot. His buddy with the toothpick spat on the ground. "No trouble? That's what they all say. But we keep an eye on things around here. Make sure the wrong types don't stick around too long." I felt the pump click off, the tank full. But I didn't move right away. My hands were steady on the nozzle. But inside, my mind was racing. The bat glinted under the lights as he tapped it against my truck's fender. Thunk, thunk. Like he was testing how hard he'd need to swing. The other two stepped closer, blocking my path back to the cab. I could smell the beer on their breath, mixed with the diesel fumes, and it made my stomach turn. You ever have that moment where time slows down, and every little detail sticks in your head? The way the neon sign buzzed overhead, the distant hum of a semi pulling out onto the highway, the cold metal of the pump handle still in my grip. I thought about my boys. Daryl with his fancy job, Marcus with his garage. What would they say if I didn't make it home? Would they even know how much I loved them, even if we didn't talk deep like we used to? The leader leaned in, his face inches from mine. "Why don't you tell us what you're hauling, huh? Make sure it ain't nothing stolen." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as the desert sand. "Frozen food. For stores back home. Look, I ain't looking for problems. Just let me get on my way." But he wasn't listening. He nodded to his friends, and one of them pulled out a phone. "Well, it's starting to record," you say. "Smile for the camera, old-timer." Folks online gonna love seeing another one of you thinking you own the road. I gripped the pump handle tighter, wondering if I could make it to the cab before they swung that bat. The phone in the guy's hand caught the yellow light and flashed like a tiny accusation. I could already picture the video going up, grainy footage of an old black trucker, standing frozen at the pump, looking guilty just for existing. My pulse hammered in my ears louder than the diesel engine idling behind me. The leader kept that bat resting easy on his shoulder, but his eyes had the hard shine of someone who'd already decided how the night would end. I forced my fingers to loosen on the pump handle. Dropping it would make noise. Noise might give them the excuse they wanted. Instead, I hung it back on the cradle, slow, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. "Look," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "I got a schedule. People waiting on this load. I'm gone in 30 seconds if you step aside." The one with the toothpick snorted. "Schedule? You hear that, Isai Kiat boys? He's got a schedule." He stepped forward, boots scraping gravel. Close enough I could smell the cheap whiskey rolling off him. Maybe we should help him stay on time. Make sure he don't come back this way no more. The leader raised the bat just an inch, not swinging yet, just reminding me it was there. "Empty your pockets first. Let's see what kind of ID an old-timer like you carries these days." I didn't move, not because I was brave. Lord knows bravery had mostly worn thin. But because moving wrong could turn a bad night into my last one. My mind flicked through options. Talk my way out, run for the diner, or climb back in the cab. None of them felt good. Then the leader's phone buzzed in his buddy's grip. He glanced at the screen, grinned wider, and turned the camera back on me. Smile, Pops. Already got 200 views and we ain't even started yet. Something inside me cracked. Not anger exactly. More like a long-held dam finally giving way. All those years on the road, dodging tickets, bad weather, drunk drivers, days heart attacks from too much coffee and not enough sleep. And here I was, still explaining myself to strangers with bats and cell phones, still proving I belonged on the same highway everyone else used without question. I took one careful step backward toward the cab door. I'm getting in my truck now. I told them, y'all can film whatever you want, but I'm leaving. The toothpick guy lunged, not to hit me, but to block the door handle. Nah, you ain't going nowhere till we say. That was the moment the night tilted. I felt the shift in my bones. The same way you feel the trailer start to fishtail on wet asphalt before you see it. I raised both hands, palms out. Classic surrender sign truckers learn early. Easy. I'm not fighting anybody. But the leader wasn't buying the calm act anymore. He swung the bat in a lazy arc, letting the whoosh of air brush my face. You think you can talk your way out like always? We seen your kind pull that before. My mouth went cotton dry. I glanced past them toward the diner windows. A waitress stood inside wiping a counter, staring out at us like a late-night TV show. She didn't move to help. Didn't even pick up the phone. Just watched. I swallowed once. Hard. All right, I said. You win. I'll sit here till the cops come. The words tasted like defeat. But sometimes defeat buys you breathing room. They laughed. Short, ugly barks. And the leader lowered the bat a fraction. Smart man. Now sit your ass on the ground. Hands where we can see 'em. I started to bend my knees. Slow, buying seconds. That's when I heard the faint gurgle. Liquid pouring somewhere it shouldn't. The toothpick guy had slipped around to the side of my rig while we talked. I caught the glint of a red gas can in his hand. The spout shoved into the coolant reservoir. Diesel in the cooling system. 1 mile down the road, and the engine would seize solid. My stomach dropped like I'd driven off an overpass. Hey, I started. The leader stepped in front of me again. Bat raised higher now. Problem? I shut my mouth. I needed them gone before they finished the job. So I sat down on the cold gravel, back against the front tire, hands resting loose on my thighs. The rough stones bit through my jeans. The night air felt colder suddenly, sharper against my neck. They stood over me, filming, muttering to each other, laughing at whatever caption they were typing. Then, satisfied, they backed off toward a jacked-up pickup parked in the shadows. The leader gave one last tap on my fender with the bat. Thunk. Like a period at the end of a sentence. Stay put, old man, he called over his shoulder. We'll be watching. Their taillights flared red, then disappeared onto the access road. I waited until the sound of their engine faded completely before I moved. I popped the hood, shone my phone flashlight down. Dark streaks of diesel floating. Ruined. I stood there, in the stink of antifreeze, feeling every one of my 68 years pressing down. The waitress was still watching from the diner window. She hadn't called anyone. I pulled my own phone out, thumb hovering over the roadside assistance number. But a different notification caught my eye. An old text thread from Daryl. Dad, me and Lisa are expecting. Baby due in March. We're excited. But Lisa's folks are coming to stay a while after. They're kinda old school. They don't really get the whole trucker thing. She's worried the neighbors will talk. Maybe it's better if you don't come by for a bit, just till things settle. Love you. I read it twice, then a third time, the words blurring under the flashlight beam. The diesel in my coolant suddenly felt like the smallest problem I had. I lowered the phone, stared out at the empty highway stretching east toward home. I felt something deep in my chest give way with a quiet, tired crack. I sank back against the fender, phone still glowing in my lap. And for the first time in 40 years, I let the tears come. They fell hot and silent onto the cold metal step beneath me. Toidara soat lai toan bovan ban pan 3 ma bangui, koang 1.1502, de doi chu voi ban chia voice. Ket kwa kiem tra, ban chia voi wise 8 yaifia tren van thiu koang, 20% noi dung van ban, dak biet la kak doan hoi thoai chi tiet gua, Earl va Jake. Va doan mo takam zuki, Earl o trong kan ho kua Jake. De kop huan toan, 100% kong sot mot chu. Va gyudong nip do 8 gai doan. Toi da tin toan laiva chia. Then 86 doan voice. Doi de la checklist de du. Da bo sung kak don thieu. Checklist voice. Fan 3. De, do 100% van ban. The salt from those tears stung my eyes. Mixing with the chill of the wind whipping through the lot, I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, rough denim scratching my skin, and forced myself to stand. The rig loomed over me like a tired old beast, its hood still propped open, exposing the mess they'd made. I couldn't fix this alone, not in the dark, not without tools or a flush kit. My fingers, numb from the cold, fumbled for the roadside assistance number again. I dialed, voice cracking, as I explained the sabotage to the dispatcher on the other end. She promised help within the hour. But in a place like this, an hour felt like forever. While I waited, huddled in the cab with the heater blasting dry air, Daryl's text burned in my mind. It felt like a bad detour sign I couldn't ignore. The boy I'd taught to change a tire before he could ride a bike. Now treating me like some embarrassment to hide from the in-laws. I scrolled back through our messages, birthday wishes, quick check-ins, photos of his new grill or the dog. Nothing deep, nothing that said, "Dad, you're still part of this." Clara would have known what to say. She'd have called him up, voice sweet as honey but firm as steel, and set him straight. But she was gone. And I was here, staring at a poisoned engine, and a family that felt further away than Little Rock ever had. Headlights cut through the night about 40 minutes later, not the goons returning. Thank God. But a tow truck rumbling in from the east, lights flashing amber warnings across the pumps. The driver hopped out, a lanky kid in his mid-20s, wearing a grease-stained jacket and a ball cap turned backward. He had that fresh-faced look, like the road hadn't beaten him down yet, with freckles across his nose. And a quick smile that didn't match the hour. "You Earl Jackson," he called, clipboard in hand. I nodded, climbing down from the cab. "That's me. They dumped diesel in the coolant. Whole system's fouled." He whistled low, peering under the hood with a flashlight. "Nasty work. Seen pranks before. But this is meant to strand you good." He straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Name's Jake. I'll get her towed to my shop in Gallup. It's about 20 miles back. You can ride with me. No extra charge." I hesitated. Gallup wasn't on my route. It meant backtracking, delaying the delivery. But what choice did I have? The rig wasn't moving without a full flush and maybe new hoses. "Appreciate it," I muttered, grabbing my duffel from the sleeper berth. We rode in silence at first, the tow truck bouncing over potholes, my rig trailing behind like a wounded animal. Jake fiddled with the radio, landing on some late-night talk show droning about politics. He glanced my way. "You look like you've been at this a while. How many years?" "Over 40, I said, staring out at the dark scrubland flashing by. "Started right after high school. Thought it'd be temporary. Turned into a life." He chuckled. "My old man was the same. Drove cross-country till his back gave out. Passed a couple years back." "Sorry to hear." I paused, the words feeling heavy. "Road takes its toll." Jake nodded, eyes on the highway. He used to tell stories about the folks he met. Said the real heroes weren't the ones with the fancy rigs, but the ones who stopped when no one else would. Something in his tone made me look over. Your dad, what was his name? Tom Harlan, drove for Swift back in the day. The name hit me like a bump in the road I didn't see coming. 22 years ago, up in the Rockies near Eisenhower Tunnel, a whiteout storm had turned I-70 into a skating rink. I'd been hauling produce west when I spotted a flipped semi in the median. Cab crumpled like tin foil. Flames licking the undercarriage from a busted fuel line. Other drivers blew past, horns blaring, too scared to stop. But I pulled over, grabbed my fire extinguisher, and waded through the snow. The driver, Tom, was pinned inside, leg twisted bad, blood on his face. I yanked the door open, sprayed down the fire, and dragged him clear just before the tank blew. We sat in my cab waiting for the ambulance. Him shaking, me handing him a thermos of coffee. He kept saying, "I owe you my life, brother." Never saw him again after that night. Tom Harlan, I repeated, voice barely above the engine rumble. I knew him. Pulled him out of a wreck in Colorado once. Long time ago. Jake's hands tightened on the wheel. He pulled over to the shoulder, killed the engine, and turned to face me full on. The dashboard lights cast shadows on his face, making him look older suddenly. You're the guy? The black trucker who saved his ass in the blizzard? I nodded slow, the memory flooding back, the snow stinging my eyes, the heat from the flames. Tom's grateful grip on my arm as the paramedics loaded him up. Jake let out a breath, like he'd been holding it forever. Dad talked about you till the day he died. Said you were the bravest son of a gun he ever met. Pulled him from the wreckage when everyone else kept driving. Told me and my sister the story 100 times. If you ever meet that man, he'd say, you pay it forward. Give him your life if you have to. I sat there, stunned, the tow truck cab feeling smaller than before. All those years, I'd chalked it up to just another night on the job. One good deed in a sea of forgotten miles. Never thought it stuck with anyone but me. Didn't do it for thanks. I managed. Just couldn't leave him there. Jake shook his head, eyes shining a bit in the dim light. But it mattered. Dad lived another 20 years because of you. Raised us. Saw grandkids. He kept your description. Said if he ever crossed paths again, he'd know you by the scar on your hand from the hot metal. I glanced down at my right palm. The faded burn mark from that night still there, like a road map of old choices. We drove the rest of the way to Gallup with Jake filling the silence. Stories about his dad post-accident. How he'd switched to local runs. Coached Little League. Never forgot that storm. By the time we pulled into Jake's small garage on the edge of town, a cinder block setup with neon signs buzzing Harlan Auto. The weight on my chest had shifted. Not lighter exactly, but different. Like finding an old photo in a drawer that reminds you life wasn't always empty highways. Jake insisted I crash at his place above the shop. A simple apartment with a pull-out couch, microwave dinners, and walls lined with family pictures. Tom stared out from one frame. Older, but still with that same grateful smile. I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles, replaying Jake's words. For decades, I'd figured my life was invisible. Miles logged, loads delivered, no one noticing the man behind the wheel. Clara saw me, sure, but after she went, it was like fading into the rear view. And now this kid, treating me like some legend from his dad's bedtime tales. It stirred something raw. A flicker of worth I hadn't felt since pushing my boys on swings in the backyard. Morning came gray and dusty, Gallup stirring slow under a low sun. I woke to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. Jake was already at work, draining my coolant system. I joined him, handing tools when he asked, the routine familiar as breathing. She'll be roadworthy by noon, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. But you don't have to rush off. Stay another day if you want. I shook my head. Got to think on that. Might be time to hang up the keys for good. He didn't push. Instead, we talked shop. Best routes through the Southwest. Worst diners for food poisoning. The way trucking had changed with GPS and regulations. Around 10, my phone buzzed on the workbench. Daryl's name flashing. I stared at it, thumb hovering, debating whether to let it go to voicemail. Last night's tears were still fresh, his words still stinging. But something in Jake's story nudged me. I answered, "Dad?" Daryl's voice came through shaky, like he'd been up all night. "Oh God, Dad, I saw the video. It's everywhere. Facebook, the news feeds. Those bastards at the truck stop. Lisa saw it too. She's been crying since midnight. Said she was dead wrong about everything. The neighbors, her folks. None of that matters. She wants you here when the baby comes. Hell, I want you here, please. Dad, just come home." The garage echoed with the clank of tools dropping somewhere in the back. I leaned against the workbench, phone pressed to my ear, watching Jake hose down my engine. Daryl's sobs filtered through the line, raw and real. I closed my eyes, letting the silence stretch. Part of me wanted to lash out, tell him how his text cut deeper than Bat Kikage now. But another part, the one warmed by Jake's unexpected debt repaid, softened the edges. "Son," I said finally, voice steady as I could make it. "I'm not mad at you. Not really. But I've got some miles to cover in my head first. I'll come see that grandbaby someday. Just not right now." Daryl went quiet, then whispered, "I understand. Love you, Dad." The line clicked off, leaving me with the hum of the garage fan and the faint drip of water from the hose. The drip echoed in my ears like a metronome, counting down the remnants of a life I wasn't sure I wanted to reclaim. I set the phone down on the workbench, its screen fading to black, and turned toward the bay where Jake was finishing up. The morning sun slanted through the open garage door, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. It's dotted with oil stains and scattered wrenches. He looked up from the engine, hose still in hand, water pooling at his feet in shallow puddles. They reflected the light like shattered mirrors. "All good?" he asked, straightening his back with a wince that told me he was no stranger to long hours. Bent over machines. I managed to nod, though my throat felt tight as a rusted bolt. Family stuff, nothing new under the sun. He didn't pry. Good kid. Knew when to let silence do the talking. Instead, he tossed me a rag. "She's clean now. Flushed the whole system twice. You can roll out whenever." But rolling out didn't feel right anymore. The rig sat there, gleaming a bit under the fresh rinse. But it looked different to me now, like a relic from someone else's story. I wiped my hands on the rag, feeling the grit embed in my palms, and glanced around the shop. Harlan Auto wasn't fancy. A couple of lifts, shelves crammed with parts, a calendar on the wall with coffee rings staining the dates, but it hummed with purpose. The kind I'd lost somewhere between endless interstates and empty rest stops. "You got room for an extra hand?" I heard myself ask, the word surprising even me. Not full-time, just something to fill the days. Jake's eyebrows shot up, but he grinned. "Hell yeah. Dad always said experience like yours is gold. We could use help with the big rigs that come through. Diagnostics, tune-ups. Pays not highway wages, but it's steady." We shook on it right there, his grip firm and callous like his father's had been that night in the snow. No contracts, no fuss, just two men agreeing to share a patch of concrete. I called the warehouse in Little Rock next. Explained the delay without the ugly details. I told them to find another driver for the return leg. The load would get where it needed. My days of chasing deadlines across state lines were done. That first week in Gallup blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I craved. Mornings started with coffee from Jake's ancient percolator, strong enough to strip paint. We sipped while we sorted through the day's jobs. I'd tinker with engines, diesels mostly, the kind that reminded me of my own rig, and without the loneliness of solo runs. Afternoons brought locals, Navajo folks from the res with beat-up pickups, tourists with RVs throwing codes, even a few long haulers like I used to be, stopping for quick fixes before pushing on. I'd chat with them, swapping tales of bad loads or worse weather, but now from behind a counter instead of a wheel. Jake's family folded me in easy. His wife, Maria, a nurse at the local clinic with a laugh that filled rooms, invited me for dinners, enchiladas steaming hot, kids running underfoot, asking questions about the big trucks Grandpa Tom talked about. Their boy, little Tommy, all of 5 with wide eyes and endless energy, would climb onto my lap, begging for stories. Did you ever see a tornado, Mr. Earl, or a ghost on the road? I'd spin yarns, not the dark ones, not yet, but the good stuff. Sunrises over the Grand Canyon, elk crossing highways at dawn. The time I hauled Christmas trees through a blizzard and delivered them to a shelter just in time. It felt like breathing fresh air after years in a stuffy cab. Maria noticed the change one evening. As we cleared plates, "You look lighter, Earl, like you've set down a heavy bag." She was right. The weight of those invisible miles, the ones where no one saw you, no one cared if you made it, had started to lift. I still thought about Daryl every day, the hurt from his words lingering like a phantom ache. We'd text now and then, short updates on the baby prep, weather reports from Memphis, no deep dives, no apologies revisited. I kept my new setup quiet at first, not ready to explain why I'd traded the open road for a garage. Gallup grew on me in ways the highway never could. The red rock cliffs framing the town, the mix of cultures in the markets, silver jewelry from local artisans, green chilies roasting on street corners. I'd walk evenings along Route 66, the historic stretch cutting through like a vein of faded glory. I felt connected to something solid. No more chasing horizons here. The horizon came to you. Months turned the calendar pages without fanfare. I rented a small place above a bookstore downtown, a one-bedroom with a view of the train tracks. Freights rumbled by at night, like old acquaintances waving hello. Work at the garage became routine magic, fixing a transmission for a single mom, teaching Jake's nephew how to read engine codes, even volunteering at the community center to talk shop with kids from rough homes. The road's not just asphalt. I'd tell them, it's choices. Pick the ones that lead somewhere worth going. One crisp fall day, about a year in, my phone rang while I was elbow deep in a Semi's alternator. Daryl's name again. I wiped grease on my jeans and answered, heart picking up speed like an engine revving. "Dad, it's time." Lisa had the baby last night. A boy, healthy, screaming his lungs out, his voice cracked with joy. The kind that makes a man sound young again. I leaned against the workbench. Tools forgotten. That's real good. Son, what's his name? Earl Jr. After you... Lisa's idea, she said she wants him to know his grandpa. The real one. Not the stories we tell to hide things. The garage blurred for a second. The hum of the fan blending with the distant train whistle. I cleared my throat. I'd like that. We talked longer that time. Details about the birth. How Marcus had driven up to help. Even a laugh about old family trips in the rig. No forcing forgiveness. It seeped in natural. Like rain filling cracks in dry earth. I didn't rush back to Memphis. Waited till little Earl was 3, sturdy on his feet and full of questions. Before I booked a bus ticket east, no more driving for me. The keys stayed hung up in the garage. The ride gave me time to think. Watching landscapes roll by from the passenger side for once. When I stepped off in Memphis, Daryl was there at the station, looking older himself. Lines around his eyes from new parent nights. We hugged awkward at first, then tight, like mending a frayed rope. At the house, Lisa met me at the door with a warm smile. No trace of the old reservations. And little Earl, God, he was a spitfire. Toddled right up, grabbed my leg, and looked up with eyes that mirrored mine. "Grandpa drive big truck?" I knelt down, level with him, and ruffled his hair. "Used to, kiddo, but now I fix 'em and tell stories about the miles." We spent the afternoon in the backyard, him on my knee as I pointed out clouds shaped like semis, Daryl grilling burgers nearby, Lisa snapping photos. It wasn't perfect. No erasing the past hurts, but it was real. A bridge rebuilt, plank by plank. Back in Gallup, life settled into a gentle cadence. I'd call the boys weekly now, sharing garage mishaps or Tommy's latest antics. The rig? Sold it to a young driver starting out, passed on with a quiet blessing. No regrets. The road had given me scars. Sure, but also this, a second act in a town that felt like home, surrounded by folks who saw me clear. Sometimes, late at night, with the trains rumbling past, I'd think back to that truck stop, the bat, the diesel, the text that cracked me open. It could have ended me. Instead, it rerouted everything, led me to Jake, to forgiveness, to a grandson's hug. Life's like that, full of detours you never map, but they take you where you need to be. If you've stuck with me this far, you know what it's like to carry invisible weights. Maybe you've got your own. Drop a line below. Say, "I'm here," if Nung Loi Ne Cham Toi Ban means the world to an old guy like me. Thanks for listening. Till next time, keep your eyes on the horizon. The train whistle faded into the distance like an old friend saying goodbye one last time. I stood on the small balcony of my rented place above the bookstore, coffee mug warm in my hands, watching the taillights of the last freight disappear around the bend. The night air carried the faint scent of pinon pine from the hills. For the first time in decades, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Downstairs, the bookstore owner, Mrs. Rivera, had left the porch light on again. She did that every evening now, ever since I started helping her unload boxes of used paperbacks. "Keeps the ghosts away," she'd say with a wink, though we both knew it was more about making sure I didn't trip on the stairs. Coming home late from the garage, I set the mug on the railing and leaned forward, elbows on the iron, letting the cool metal press against my forearms. The town lights twinkled below, street lamps, neon from the diner. The soft glow from Jake's garage was still on because he never remembered to flip the switch. I thought about little Earl Jr. back in Memphis, probably asleep by now, with his thumb in his mouth the way Daryl used to do at that age. The photo Lisa sent yesterday was still open on my phone. The boy in a tiny trucker hat I'd mailed him, grinning wide enough to show the gap where a front tooth was missing. He asked for Grandpa stories every night, the text read. I hadn't replied yet. Some things you need to sit with before you answer. Inside, the apartment was simple. A worn recliner by the window, a small TV I rarely turned on, shelves starting to fill with books. Mrs. Rivera insisted I borrow. You can't fix engines all day and not feed your mind. Earl, I'd started with a collection of road poetry, then moved to memoirs by folks who'd walked harder paths than mine. Reading them felt like sitting around a campfire with strangers who understood the ache, without needing any explanations. I crossed back inside, leaving the balcony door cracked to let the night breeze wander through. The recliner creaked as I settled in, boots still on, because old habits die hard. My hands, still carrying traces of grease under the nails despite scrubbing, rested in my lap. They looked different now, not just older, but steadier. The burn scar from that Colorado night had faded to a pale line, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The phone buzzed on the side table. Marcus this time. I answered without hesitation. Hey, old man? You still breathing out there in the desert? I chuckled, the sound surprising me with how easy it came. Barely. You? Same. Kids are driving me nuts. But listen, Daryl told me about the visit. Said the little guy wouldn't let go of your leg. Lisa's already planning Thanksgiving. You coming? I paused, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles. The question hung there. Not demanding, just waiting. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'll be there." Marcus let out a breath I didn't know he'd been holding. "Good. Real good. We'll pick you up at the station. No arguments." We talked a while longer about his shop, my latest project at Harlan Auto, a vintage Peterbilt someone dragged in from the res. The way the grandkids were starting to look like Clara around the eyes. When we hung up, the apartment felt warmer, the silence friendlier. I reached for the poetry book on the table, opened it to a dog-eared page. The words were simple. Something about how the longest journeys end not at a destination. But when you finally stop running from yourself, I read it twice, letting each line settle. Later, when the clock pushed past midnight, I stood up, stretched the stiffness from my back, and walked to the window again. The garage light was off now. Jake must have finally called it a night. I thought about the rig I'd sold, about the miles it carried me through, about the nights I drove just to keep from feeling the hole Clara left behind. Those miles had taken plenty, but they'd given something back too. This small corner of the world where I wasn't just passing through. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the streetlight filtering through the blinds, soft stripes across the floor. In the dark, I could almost hear the old engine hum, feel the vibration of the road under me one last time. But it didn't pull at me anymore. The pull was here now, in the creak of the recliner, in the promise of a Thanksgiving table, in the quiet knowledge that I'd finally parked somewhere that felt like staying. Before sleep took me, I whispered into the empty room, not to anyone in particular, just to let the words exist. I'm here. And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it. The words hung in the air like steam from a fresh pot of coffee, warming the room even as sleep tugged at my edges. I lay there in the dim glow of the streetlight, the fan's steady whirl blending with the occasional car passing below, and let my mind wander back, not to the pains, but to the small anchors that had kept me from drifting away. The bookstore's bell jingling downstairs, Jake's quiet nod of approval, Maria's homemade tamales wrapped in foil for my lunch. These weren't grand gestures. They were the mortar between bricks, building something solid without fanfare. Morning came with the sun creeping over the cliffs, painting the town in gold and rust. It made the desert feel alive. I rose earlier than usual, joints protesting less, and headed down to the garage on foot. The walk was my new ritual. A few blocks through streets lined with adobe shops and murals of ancient petroglyphs, reminders that stories older than mine had etched themselves into this land. Gallup wasn't just a stopover anymore. It was a chapter I was writing day by day. Jake was already there, buried under the hood of a dusty Ford pickup, radio murmuring classic rock, low enough not to drown out thought. "Morning, boss," he teased, tossing me a socket wrench without looking up. We'd fallen into that easy banter, like gears meshing after a good oil change. I caught the tool midair, feeling the familiar weight. "Boss, last I checked, this is your name on the sign." He laughed, emerging with a smear of grease on his cheek. "Yeah, but you're the one with the wisdom. That Peterbilt runs like new because of you." We worked side by side through the morning rush, a farmer's tractor, a traveler's SUV. Between jobs, I shared bits of the call with Marcus, not the details, just the warmth. Jake listened without interrupting, then said, "Families bend, Earl, don't break. Sounds like yours is starting to straighten out." His words stuck with me. By afternoon, the shop quieted, giving me time to tinker with a side project, an old CB radio I'd salvaged. I wired it up in the corner, static crackling to life like echoes from my past. Flipping channels, I caught snippets of truckers chatting, route tips, weather warnings. It wasn't my world anymore, but tuning in felt like visiting kin. That evening, Mrs. Rivera stopped by with a stack of books. These came in today. Thought of you. Histories of Route 66, tales from black travelers, poems about reinvention. I thanked her, and we sat on the garage steps as the sun dipped low, sharing a thermos of tea. She spoke of her own moves, from Mexico to here. "We all carry old maps," she said. "Sometimes you have to draw new ones." Her insight lingered as I climbed the stairs later, books under my arm. The apartment welcomed me with its familiar creaks, the fan still turning. I skimmed one of the histories that night, pages whispering about hidden sundown towns. It mirrored my own detours, but reading it now didn't sting. It illuminated. Weeks blended into seasons, Gallup's rhythm syncing with my own. Thanksgiving came, and I took that bus east, stepping into Daryl's home, like crossing a threshold I'd built myself. The table groaned with turkeys and sides, laughter filling the air as little Earl chased his cousins around. Lisa pulled me aside in the kitchen, eyes soft. "I'm glad you're here. Really." We didn't dwell on the past. We just existed in the present. Passing plates. Back west, I expanded my role at the community center. Workshops for teens on basic mechanics, laced with life lessons. An engine fails when parts don't connect. People too. One kid, a quiet Navajo boy named Kai, stuck around after sessions, asking about my scars. I told him the Colorado story, just stating facts. "Sometimes helping costs you," I said. "But not helping costs more." Kai nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Like echoes, what you send out comes back." His words became my new mantra. The CB radio evolved into a podcast of sorts. Recording sessions with Jake. Sharing road lore for a small online audience. Listeners trickled in. Other retirees, young drivers, folks hungry for authenticity. Comments poured like rain. "Your voice reminds me of my grandpa." Helped me through a tough shift. One message stood out. From a woman in Arkansas. "Your story made me call my dad after years. Thank you." I replied simply, "Glad the echo found you." As winter settled over Gallup, snow dusting the red rocks like powdered sugar, I stood on the balcony again, mug in hand. The train whistled far off. But this time, it didn't pull at loose ends. It harmonized with the life I'd pieced together. No more chasing, just being. The scars remained, faint lines on a map, but they pointed to places worth remembering. If these echoes resonate with you, let me know below. Just a word or two. It keeps the conversation going, like headlights cutting through fog. Thanks for riding along. See you down the line.
Look at him standing there like he owns the place.
Keep that light on him. Got it. Smile for the camera, old man.
You might want to check your coolant, driver.
You hear me? This is our stop tonight.
I hear you.
You're the guy, the one who saved my dad.